Good evening, everyone. I hope that you are ready for a new experience of clinical pastoral education. And for those of you who are new for your first unit, new to the program, I think you're going to enjoy it, even though it can be very challenging and difficult and sometimes painful as we look at ourselves and how we can help others. But I'm excited that there is a new program starting, and that I can be a part of this halfway around the world. It's wonderful. And tonight, I want to talk about Chaplain Nato has given me the topic coping with addiction and mood disorders and or bereavement, grief. And so this is a big topic, and I don't know if I'm covering enough in this session, but I'm trying to summarize the highlights. But I thought that I would start with, for those of you that are newer to the program, just a little bit about addiction or addiction behavior. Um, each addiction that a person has is unique, just as each person is unique. In other ways, it doesn't matter whether the addiction is to drugs, alcohol, or another damaging substance, or a damaging behavior. There are a number of common traits to addiction and addictive behavior. And I'm just going to give you a few strategies to help you deal with the overall topic of addiction. So, we will talk about addiction first. It's important to learn that addiction is actually a disease process. And for a long time, uh, the medical field even thought that addiction was some type of personal weakness or moral failing. But now, just like with mental illness disorders, they classify addiction as a disease. So, alcoholism, any substance abuse, drugs, any other addictive behavior is actually biologically a disease because it falls into the category usually of being acute and or chronic. And along the path to acquiring an addiction, each of us has moments where we can make choices. Diba? But sometimes we don't make the best choices, and we are responsible for that. There comes a point in every addiction journey, however, where the power of the addiction, whatever it may be, overwhelms our moral and psychological freedom to choose and be responsible. And so, in that sense, addiction can leave a person powerless. And the 12-step AA program, Anonymous, uh, points this out. The 12 steps, willpower can't control a full blown addiction. Willpower or desire to stop the addictive behavior uh, can't control a overcome an addiction. So, the concept of addiction developing into a disease of the spirit and of the body is legitimate and is generally accepted by respected authorities in the medical, psychological, and religious fields. So the key question is someone ready to admit that they have this disease, that they are powerless to stop it on their own? And the big question is this person willing to get the help that they need? And sometimes that process of coming to that point is uh, very painful and difficult for the person that is in addiction and for the people around that person, families, close friends, coworkers. So it's hard. The longer the addiction has been going on, the harder it is to get to the point to really honestly face it. And that's why we need God and faith, but we also need the community resources that God works through to help people. And there are 4 facts about addiction. I just want to give you those quickly. Fact 1 is that virtually anything can become the source of an addiction. And so, as I said before, these include substances and behaviors that are highly toxic in any quantity, but also others that are good or necessary if handled in moderation, can cause great damage when taken to excess or engaged in compulsively. So this is saying that any substances or behaviors that are toxic, that others might use, like for example, medication or a trait, a behavior, their moderation of that does not lead to an addiction. But for others, when substances, drugs, alcohol, um, behaviors that have gotten out of control and very compulsive, even sex, eating, gambling, all of those kind of addictive behaviors fall into the category that anything can be a source of addiction. So that's fact number 1. Fact number 2 is that anyone can be a candidate for an addiction. I don't know over there in the Philippines, but over here in the States, there are lots of what we call workaholics. And some of it is not necessary. It's part of their lifestyle that they can't stop. And whereas in a lower economic social status where a person has to take on 2 or 3 jobs in order to survive, that is different than a person choosing out of a emotional need, deep need, that they just keep working and to accomplish and to prove themselves sometimes, that is another type of an addiction. So anyone, social class, level of education, moral standards, depth of religious conviction, financial means, and similar facts have nothing to do with whether or not someone develops an addiction. But it's a true but kind of scary thought that no one is immune. I should clarify that. No one is immune from the risk of an addiction. Um, so let's keep that in mind when we're talking with people that you are working with. Fact three, addiction by its nature, in order to be classified as an addiction, is chronic, ongoing, continuous, and progressive. So once that disease state of addiction, a person that is an addict or addicted or, can't break free of the strongholds of being addicted, and it becomes so toxic, it can keep progressing unless there is intervention. It is just the nature, the strong psychological, emotional undercurrent of addiction, and that keeps that person in that prison like condition. And so, chronic and progressive. Remember those two words. And so that's why you might also hear an alcoholic that has faced their disease and taken responsibility say, I am a recovering alcoholic, because they are recovering alcoholics for life. Because if they were to take a drink 10 to 20 years later, say they were recovering alcoholics, it would throw the body and the mind and emotions in a tailspin, and they would get back um, into drinking again. And that's a proven fact. That's actual fact. And so, same with someone who has stopped cigarette smoking, and then they might go 10, 20 years and they want to start smoking or need a cigarette for some reason, and then it takes them back into that process of becoming dependent on it. So addiction is chronic and in nature and can be progressive. Fact four, addictions fall into two classes: those which involve harmful or toxic substance or behavior and must be treated and supported with total abstinence, because you can't do it sometimes and not do it sometimes and not do it. And then there's other types of situations where there might be good things, but they are used in a bad way eventually. And so they have to be monitored so that the person does this in moderation. So, one of the workaholic syndromes that I mentioned earlier, usually therapy, talk therapy, counseling helps a person realize why they just get on the treadmill working and can't stop. So, moderation, or sometimes same thing with food. I know here in the States, it's very different than over in the Philippines, and lots and lots and lots of very overweight, obese people, and our disease is high here because of it. And so, if a person that was an emotional eater, addicted to food in that way, stress, high emotional eater, then if you just stop, and they might stop eating, and then another mental health disorder would develop, like anorexic. A person might become anorexic. So, and then finally, with addiction, we help people to face the roadblock of denial and shame and fear, because all of that is part of addictive behaviors, especially. And so denying, I don't really have a problem, I'm okay, and not wanting to face the reality and the consequences of that. And then when they start to face that, there's the shame and guilt and fear, of course. So it takes a long time sometimes for a person to get in that position to do that, because usually with addictions there's denial, denial, denial. So anyway, those are just a few things I wanted to bring out, and now I want to just give you this worksheet, or talk about this worksheet that actually Chaplain Nato sent me. And so this is a way to, well, it's like an assessment, or kind of like a worksheet to help you as a counselor, pastoral caregiver, chaplain, help anyone. And sometimes the best thing we can do is start with ourselves, right? And then, we live in families and communities, and then we help people in a lot of different ways, whether professionally in a workplace, or friends, and, church and other places. So this is a worksheet that I'm going to ask Chaplain Nato if he would just let you all have this as well as a copy for yourself. But it's coping with addiction and mood disorder. So a mood disorder is could be anything from depression, anxiety disorder, to bipolar, and there's levels of bipolar: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Um, and then you get into more serious mental illness like schizophrenia, paranoia, schizophrenia, and um, other mental disorders. But we're talking particularly about the mood being depression and anxiety, and with borderline, with bipolar disorder, there are mood swings between very manic, high, high energy, high intensity, to very low, depressed. And so what do we do with someone who has an addiction and also has a mood disorder? Or another form of depression is grief. Grief or bereavement is when we lose something that is very important in our lives, and that might be a relationship, a loved one that dies, a divorce, the loss of a job, anything that causes sadness, because there is a loss. It's no longer with a person. And so, yes, can these two things run parallel? Addiction and mood disorders, or grief, bereavement. Yes. So you have to approach treating both of them simultaneously. And oftentimes, say the mood disorder is first, say depression, anxiety, and if it's not handled and coped with in a healthy way, then it can lead to addiction of a substance, alcohol, drugs, in order to numb the pain, emotional, mental pain. And vice versa. So one is actually a risk for the other. And sometimes the addiction might be first, and it could lead to the depression, the anxiety, because after all, alcohol is a depressant chemically on the body. So it might cause someone to feel buzzed or, intoxicated or relaxed or whatever. But ultimately, its effect on the body is depression or depressed state physically and mentally. And so it is a depressor. And then with drugs, a lot of times people want to take the drugs or even marijuana because they want to feel up. They want to overcome the depression through substance abuse. So they're very interchangeable, or they're very synonymous, parallel. You, 50, I think I saw statistics where 50% here in our nation, our country, usually had mental disorder, mood disorder, and addiction. So that'll give you a sense of how integrated things can be emotionally, mentally, all of the environmental factors, family dynamics, but lots of things play into especially addiction. But usually, under addiction is deeper down. There can be physiological reasons like mental health, or there can be unresolved grief or unresolved pain or of some type that, is covered up eventually by addiction. So, um, we need to think of the ways that people voice out substance abuse, that when you hear that they use alcohol or drugs, how that has caused problems with their moods. So, um, helping people to identify a mood that may be associated with an addiction is what is the task at hand. Um, and sometimes the connection between addiction and moods works the other way. Like I said, the mood problem, depression, anxiety, fears, paranoias, things first, and then the people will then try to run from it or escape or cover up the emotional pain, and they think they'll do that for just a few times, but then they get hooked, either on a chemical or a behavior, such as gambling or high risk sex, or you know um, other behavioral issues. So having people, or when you're working with people, have them describe the moods that have maybe led them toward addiction. And so identifying, talking about, so that then as a counselor or a chaplain, you'll know how to refer them or direct them for the resources and help that they need. And a lot of times people believe that there are experiences that they couldn't handle, maybe in their past somewhere, and so they started drinking or using or acting out in some way, using drugs or acting out in some way. And so if that is in a person's past, where there was these experiences that precipitated someone going to toward drugs, alcohol, addictive, negative behaviors, toxic behaviors, then they could also be more likely to relapse if the situation was right. So it's good to help people if you're working with someone long term to help them talk about any kind of painful experiences from their past that might have led them toward either some mood disorder or some addictive substance or behavior. And then the the also trying to find maybe some people that have uh, taken advantage of the resources and intervention and the programs or support groups, and they could share some of their methods, what they did. So all of these are called recovery tools, whether that be some type of recovery program like AA, Alcohol Anonymous, or helping people learn new coping skills like meditation, prayer, mindfulness, some of those kind of ways to cope in a more positive way, or just helping them find any type of replacement activity instead of running to what they know that they can escape or numb the pain, then help them find and look for options for replacement activities. And then there are some people that are genuinely on medications by a doctor for mood disorders, whether that be bipolar or depression, anxiety. And, the question is, could they become addicted to these medications? So, but if they are being monitored by a physician and they are taking it with the physician's directions and treatment plan, and they are leaning into a support group or system, then that may be what they need is the medication for mood disorder, if that makes sense. So, a lot of people might say, well, would they be able to go into a recovery program like AA, Alcohol Anonymous, with the 12-step program? And then each kind of organization has their own policies. So AA has a written policy that it's okay as long as they are being supervised and monitored, and it's from their doctor and prescribed for them in the treatment that they need. So yeah, so being able to spread the word about that is something helpful. And then of course that person that would be in an AA program would also have a sponsor that they call anytime that they need support. And that sponsor would know that they also have mood disorders or a mental health disorder, and that they are on medicine for that, but they don't need to be taking alcohol. They're trying to get away from the addiction of alcohol. So their sponsor knows how to help them with that. So, in summary, um, when we have uh, deep pain or hurts or experiences or deep losses in our life, it does kind of turn everything upside down, and it affects our moods, our personality, our lifestyle, our relationships. So we know that there are a lot of people that are dealing with addiction, mental disorder, mental health disorder, or mood disorders. And uh, probably most people you might know around you or in your life is dealing with some grief, recent or in the past. And so this is something that's common for all of us. And there are some coping, three categories of coping with these kind of uh, disorders or situations or experiences like grief. Number one is seeking professional help. And so if you've got both addiction and grief, bereavement, or addiction and mood disorder, it's called an integrative dual diagnosis, and so it has to be an integrated approach for treatment, treating both simultaneously. And so there is therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, that helps develop coping mechanisms for triggers and for cravings. Alcoholism becomes a physiological craving. It's hard to believe that, but in the brain and through the organ systems, it and affecting the metabolism, it becomes a physical craving. And so, the integrated treatment is what is needed. Therapy for both, and then support groups. Now, some people that have very serious addiction or serious mood disorder, or have just drowning in their grief, so to speak, need sometimes a long-term counseling, or staying in a group support group like a grief support group, or bereavement support group. And then there are addiction recovery groups, support groups. Now, I know here in the States, a lot of churches have started their support groups through a program called Celebration Recovery. And that involves several different uh, types of recovery from different addictions and grief and divorce and things like that. And it's through the church, it's Christian based. So you can offer it in your church and in the community around your church that you are a light to. And then, so the professional help would be integrated treatment, therapy, talk therapy, counseling, um, and then support groups. And I don't know what you have there where you're located and your community, but check into Celebrate Recovery, Christian based addiction recovery or recovery from grief. And now in the Philippines, I know there's more and more resources, psychologically, mental health. So that's good. The second category for coping would be self-care practices. And there are three areas. One is healthy habits, things like sleep, uh, healthy eating, exercise that improves mood and overall well being. And the second thing under self care is mindfulness techniques like meditation, deep breathing, to manage stress and anxiety. And then, in also the third area of that self care is finding a way to express yourself and your feelings and what you're going through to process. So, journaling, keeping a journal, or finding another creative outlet like art, music, ways to process difficult emotions. And then the last category is separate, coping with bereavement it's very important to allow for a person to know that it's okay to grieve, because grief is a God given natural process. And so when a person deeply loses someone or something that is very vital or important to their life, it's a total loss. Something's been taken away. So it's help people grieve. We need to help people grieve more and not bottle up emotions. Then depend on your support system, whether that be friends, family, or a counselor, therapist, about your loss so that you can move through it in a healthy way with time. And then honoring your loved one, if it's a loved one loss, death of a loved one, find healthy ways to remember and celebrate the person you lost, and always keep them in memory and honor their memory. And so those are some ways that you can help. Of course, there's lots of things online and organizations, and so I just wanted to give you a brief summary tonight of this, and I felt like I needed to start with a little introduction of addiction, because for those of you, especially that are starting the CPE unit and training. So I wish you all well, good health and good learning and supportive learning, and you'll be in my prayers. So thank you. See you next time. Bye bye.